we have today is frustration that has been developing over the years because people feel marginalized, and there is a limit to which people can be deprived the opportunity to live fulfilling lives, which is what has happened. And
our guest today is Professor Phillip Effiong Jr. He's the son of General Phillip Effiong, the deputy to General Chukwuemeka Ojukwu, the leader of Biafra during the Nigerian Biafran Civil War. Effiong Jr. is a distinguished scholar and educator, currently teaching drama at Michigan State University, with a PhD in drama from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His academic journey spans teaching positions in Nigeria, Ghana, and the United States, where he has made significant contributions in areas such as drama, fiction, nonfiction, oral tradition, and writing. In his critically acclaimed memoir, Nigeria's Uncivil War, Memories of a Biafran Child, Professor Effiong Jr. reflects on the enduring scars of the war, offering a deeply personal perspective on its trauma and complex narratives that continue to shape post-war identities. His upcoming book, My Biafran Scar, A War and Post-War Narrative, set for release later this year, delves further into the lasting impact of the war and its multifaceted stories. Please join me in welcoming to the show Professor Phillip Effiong. Welcome to the show, Prof.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very well. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you today on the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here as well. There's so many people you could invite, but you've invited me, so I don't take this for granted. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let's begin with the stories in the news. We talked about leading in the stories in Africa is the ongoing issue with South Africa and the Trump administration. I wanted to know if you can weigh in on that. What do you think is going on? Why is Trump picking on South Africa?
Well, Elon Musk is from South Africa, that technically is his deputy president. South Africa has a long-standing history of being one of the most brutal and vicious racist countries, for many, many years. It victimized and devastated the lives of people, mostly Black people. But if you were not white, and that's its history. And I doubt that Mr. Trump knows the history or cares about the history of South Africa. All he's speaking, his pronouncements are the pronouncements of a man who believes in the racial superiority of European white people. And that's all he cares about. He's a product of that history. If you look at his family, if you look at his activities from when he didn't rent out property to people of color, you look at his pronouncements, and I mean, just look at his criminal record. All he's interested in is advancing this notion that Europeans, white people, Caucasians are superior and they have the right to own whatever they want, to dominate, to control power. And where they're losing that in South Africa, it becomes his problem. And to start inviting white people to America as victims is ridiculous. The people who are really being victimized around the world and who need safety in places like America, he's denying them entry to America. So I don't think this needs to be overflogged. We know what he's all about. He's a racist and supporting a racist enterprise, which is South Africa, even though changes have taken place over the years.
The other story is out of Congo. Congo is another country in Africa that has seen crisis from the very beginning. I know that your father fought in Congo. I have a distant cousin who died in Congo in the 60s. So when you look at the story of Congo, what is your take on why it continues to be the way it is?
Well, like you've rightly pointed out, my father and a number of other African and Nigerian officers served as peacekeeping, as part of the peacekeeping force in the Congo in the 60s. The Congo is one of the richest resource countries in the world. And if we don't get to the root of the problem, we'll never resolve the problem. The problem, we focus on the rebel groups, militants, and stuff like that. But there's a greater history that has not been addressed, and one that is rooted in not just the colonial history, but the neo-colonial history of the Congo. As long as it has the resources that it has, efforts will be made to get those resources by multinational corporations, and they'll do whatever they want to do, including instigate and support some of the conflicts. Companies like Nokia and other phone companies, they have no problem with the conflict, because as long as the conflict takes place, then they're able to get coltan at cheap prices, and other minerals that they need for their industries. And except we get to the root of the problem, we'll just be, the problem will be ongoing. It's not going to be resolved by arresting or killing or fighting or whatever. We need to get to the root cause of the problem, which I said has colonial and neo-colonial history.
So what should be done? AU had a meeting last month, I believe, and they agreed to send Nigeria's Olusegun Obasanjo and President Kenyatta to go and find peace in Congo. This has been going on since 60s. Why is it that Africa cannot deal with that, especially when they know the history behind the crisis?
Well, unfortunately, if you look at the AU and you look at a lot of Africa's leadership, you speak to the people of Africa, they don't have confidence in the leadership or even in the AU. I believe the resources are there. If the continent can come together, we have the resources, the human resources, we have the means, we have the intelligence, even the military resources, I believe, as well, to address these problems. But I don't know that we have the unity that we need. Unfortunately, we've become increasingly territorial. The trappings of power continues to be the main concern of a lot of our leaders. Otherwise, this single country, it is our problem. It is not the problem of the United Nations. It's not the problem of Europe. It is an African problem. And if we want to pay attention using the resources that we have, everything from intellectual resources to other professional resources, I even mentioned military resources, we can bring about change. But we're divided, and unfortunately, a lot of us are selfishly more concerned with the trappings of power. But the solution is definitely not going to come from the West. The West has never solved any of our problems on the African continent. We have the intelligence, we have the people, and we can't continue to do things the same way and expect a different result. It's time to now operate differently with a stronger sense of unity that we've exhibited over the years, and really do something about the Congo, and not just about the Congo. There are other parts of the continent where we have a crisis. They may not be as deep-seated, but they're there as well.
Is there any model that you can see that could be a way out? We see the French-speaking countries in Africa, like Burkina Faso, Niger, revolting against the French. A place like Congo, where it's Belgium that ruled, or the king that was there. How are they going to be able to remove themselves from these external forces that are trying to exploit them?
Well, it's been done. It's just that the West is not going to give up. When Thomas Sankara, when he was in power, one of the things he refused to do is accept aid from the French. He said, if you accept aid from people, that they're going to, one way or the other, they're going to control you. And we have to find a way to to fund ourselves, to provide the aid we need for ourselves, because we have it, but we've got to believe it. Mentally, I think something is happening here that continues to convince us that we need external help. We don't. I don't believe we do. I think we have all we need on the continent. The one thing I would say, though, is let's prepare for some kind of retaliation. You know, the West is not going to fold their arms because they want to constantly control us and control our resources. But let's take example from our cousins, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. The only time African Americans have made tremendous progress is when they have come together independently to do things for themselves. But look at what happened in Oklahoma. You know, the attacks are going to be there. Look at our relatives in the Caribbean. The only time they've made tremendous progress is when they've looked inward and believed in themselves. Or look at our war. Think about the survival during that war. With virtually nothing, you know, people were able to still find a way to create weapons, to create fabrics, to go back to traditional methods of healing. I was healed. I had measles. I was cured with palm wine. So we have all these things. It's just that we've got to get to a point where we believe in ourselves. Unfortunately, our colonial and enslaved history has taught us not to believe in ourselves, but I think we can regain belief in ourselves.
All right, we are going to get to the war and the story of Nigeria, but let's move away from Congo a little bit. And knowing that Nigerian soldiers participated in the first attempt to bring peace to that country. Now, looking at the situation in Congo, where and I want you to tell me if this is wrong. The rebels, the Tutsis, who are minority in Congo, are saying that they are not being treated well in Congo. And that's why they are fighting to get that be accepted and treated well within the country. And some people in Congo are saying they are not part of this country. They are part of Uganda. They are part of Rwanda. You know, so do you think that we have to go back to the conference, the Berlin Conference of 1880, 84, 85, to begin to resolve the African problem?
Yeah, I don't think we need to go back to that conference. That conference was definitely a major part of our problem. But when you see what the Tutsis, the Hutus are saying, you know, is it too different from what the Yoruba, what the Igbo are saying in Nigeria? You know, there is a massive problem across the continent where nations were created in very artificial ways, and artificial boundaries were created, and people who never lived together, we traded together, we worked together, but we didn't live under a single government. You now bring people together to live under a single government. The more powerful are likely to dominate, and that's what's happening. So we should definitely consider the harm caused by the Berlin Conference, but that is not our solution. We need to come to a point where we redefine for ourselves the administrative systems that work for us, that are different from what the Europeans brought. It doesn't mean that everything the Europeans brought was horrible. After all, there are a lot of things they've gotten from us. But we ultimately need to rely on our own values, rely on our own belief systems, rely on our own traditional systems to define what works for us. The issue of breaking away and having separate countries is not really a new thing. You know, it's happened. If you look across the Soviet Union, it happened. You look at places like you look at places like the Sudan, Eritrea. You look at a lot of countries across the world, they've come to that point where people have decided this geographical space is not good for me. I need to step out and redefine myself and achieve self-determination in a new space. So I'm not discarding that option. That option needs to be also negotiated, and where people are making those demands, they need to be respected, and we need to listen to them.
will you say that people from Katanga in the region in Congo will have been better off if they had broken out of the country at the beginning than they are? If after 50 years they're still fighting over there, there's no peace in Congo.
You know, it's hard for me to say if that's what the people are requesting. Perhaps it would have been, but there's always going to be the problem of resources. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you. When we talk about resources in the Congo, I'm not sure what Katanga has, but if that's a place like Port Harcourt, for
Niger,
instance, if
Niger
that's a
Delta,
place
yeah.
like Rio that has resources, then efforts are going to be made to prevent them from moving away. But they might be better off. I believe there are many of us that would be better off if we had more autonomy over our lives. That's what people are asking for. And those examples, you have many examples from history. Like I said, you look at the former Soviet Union, you look even countries like Ecuador, Eritrea. I have some notes here that I'm looking at. They were all part of a larger Grand Colombia. There are many examples in history. You can look at Slovakia, Armenia, Lithuania. It's not a new thing. So yeah, I believe better autonomy, if I separate, is something that's good for me, and it might be good for Katanga as well.
All right, let's come back to Nigeria. The problem in Nigeria started with the coup in, some people said with the coup in 1966, January 15th. Some people go back to 1953, the riot in Kano. Some go as far back as 40-something. You have written books and you have studied that, and your family were at the center of some of the issues that happened in Nigeria. Where would you point at and say this is where the problem started?
It's really hard, but I would go further back. The moment you have foreigners who don't respect you and who are racists coming to take charge of your affairs, that is going to create turbulence. And that, for me, is where it starts. Let's go back to when the British made Nigeria their colony, whatever we want to call it. Let's remember, however, that Nigeria, and in fact, most of Africa, had a long-standing tradition of receiving visitors to their communities. As long as those visitors came from outside, the visitors could come with their own leaders, but you had to respect the land and you had to pay tribute to the land. You can call it taxation like we call it today. And you had such settlements. The settlement of you have a large population of Igbos in the north and Easterners. It didn't start with the colonizers. It didn't start when Nigeria became Nigeria. Those communities have always been there. But the moment you create a situation where ethnic groups feel like they're struggling for resources, then that becomes a problem. And that became a major problem in Nigeria. It's not the only problem, but I would say it goes well back before the coup. The coup, what happened in 1953, those are just symptoms of a larger problem, the consequences of a problem. They weren't the problems. Those were just things that were triggered by a number of ethnic and social issues that were happening, and the conflicts that were developing. And they mightn't have happened if we didn't have the kind of colonial history that we had.
So when you look at Nigeria today, you have democracy. We've been practicing the third wave, I believe, since 1999. And it's not getting better by any standard. If you look at today's Nigeria, you have Rivers State in crisis, Osun State almost in crisis. There are problems, insecurity everywhere in the north, east, northwest, southeast. So is Nigeria safer today? Is there more hope in Nigeria today than in January or March? January, let's say go back to January of 1966.
No, Nigeria is not safer today. Even after the war, a couple of months after the war, there was relative calm and safety across Nigeria. What we have today is frustration that has been developing over the years because people feel marginalized. And there is a limit to which people can be deprived the opportunity to live fulfilling lives, which is what has happened. And so people are responding in different ways, including violent ways as well, unfortunately. And you mentioned democracy. Part of the problem is we're not really practicing democracy. And maybe you shouldn't ask people as old as myself, ask younger people. They'll more courageously tell you that we don't have a democracy. Whether you look at our recent elections or look at the way, our systems of governance, they'll say, no, there's no democracy. There is power abuse and dominance. So no, we're not safer. And what you see is the expression of frustration, and it manifests in different ways. Unfortunately, one of those ways is through violence, and unfortunately, innocent people are going to be victims. We're not safer. I lived in Nigeria all through the 60s. When I was going to secondary school, I'd get into a taxi cab, sometimes arrive late at night. It was never an issue. We moved around freely. There were hardly fences between our homes. What separated our homes were maybe flowers or low fences.